Holley wiring day, I don't know, what day is it, 4, 5, 6, 30? Feels like 30. Holley wiring day number 4. I think it's 4. If it's wrong, sorry, I can't count. But we're getting back at her in here. Holley Terminator X wiring coming at you right now. So if you've been following along with us, we have been doing a rewire on my truck. This is Clifford, my turbo 4-wheel drive LS swap truck. That was my great-grandpa's. And this is day 4 of it. It's a big mess, but it's getting better. So I've done a little bit of work off camera, and I think I have found the wire layout for my panel, and it is coming along freaking nice. So if you remember, this is where we left off at. We left off working on this wiring panel, where we're gonna put our terminal strips, how we're gonna lay all that out. We got it mounted, we got it cut, we got it installed, and everything is working out good. And as you can see, I think I have finally ended up with a layout that I think that I like. Let's go over this real quick. So when we left off, like I said, we were worried about where we were gonna put these terminal strips, how we were gonna lay them out. And as you can see, I think I figured it out. So basically what the plan is for this red strip here, this is gonna be our 5-volt pickup. This is where we're gonna pick up 5 volt for all of our sensors. It's got a little bus bar here tying everything in together. And the same thing with grounds. This is going to be for our sensor grounds for all of the sensors that need a direct sensor ground as opposed to a chassis ground. And then down here, all of these strips are going to be our inputs and outputs. Now, we don't have 16 inputs and outputs total, but we got pretty close to that between the 4 on the ECU and then the few that the dash offers as well. So that's where all of those guys are going to go, plus a few extras. I doubt that we're going to get into full-on input-output wiring today. Maybe we will. We'll get there as we go. Because as I've been telling you guys, this is not a how-to. This is how I do it. And so right now we're going to work on getting the Holley ECU itself rewired back up with a couple of loose wires that it has. So we'll go over those. It's got a, you know, it's got to have a constant power. It's got to have a switched power. It's got to have a ground here, a ground there. A couple little things like that. The trans harness, even though we're not using the stock valve body anymore, it still uses power and ground, so that way you can power up the vehicle speed sensor and a few other things. But yeah, that's what we're going to get into today. So follow along, keep watching, and let's dig in. And probably the single most important thing you can do on your Holley install is just read the instructions. These things are pretty good. They don't have all the secrets in there, but I promise you, if you read these and follow these front to back, you're going to have everything you need to know to fire up your car on the first try, or at least with minimal troubleshooting. Just read these. I'm a man, and I'm telling you other men to watch, to read these. Just do it. It's not one of those jokes where it's like, buy instructions, don't read them and be a man. It's not like that. You know, don't throw your back out. Read the instructions, dang it. And as you're reading these, you're gonna get to page 14 down here. Kind of the most important section, and that the stuff that we're going to focus on today is the loose wires. It's section 11.0 on page 14. Loose wires. You have a switched 12 volt. It is red and white. We got to find that in the truck. We have got a constant 12 volt battery. It's red. We got to find that in the truck. The fuel pump, that's green. That goes down to your fuel pump. And then chassis ground. We got to find one of those. And then optional tack output, blue with white stripe. We're not using that in our application, but if you are, pay attention to what it tells you to do with that too. Well, first things first, let's find this switched red and white power, and then we'll try to reconnect it to where it was connected up previously, because all of this has been working in my truck for a long time. We just decided to make it work better. All right, so first things first, red wire, red and white wire, the switched one. We found it, it's right there. It's coming off kind of your main harness right next to your fuse and right next to the relay that fires the coils, the fuel pump, and the injectors. All that stuff comes through this big relay right here. But either way, here's our red and white wire and a couple of our grounds that we're going to need to reconnect. And obviously, look, crappy plastic connector. That's what was grounding this thing before. Don't suggest that. Do it better. Do it better. Step number 1 is finding where this red and white wire was previously connected at. Over there, I know that I had one running under the dash already, but that was for this switched power and ground. I got to trace it out on that side, find out where it goes on this side, reconnect here in the middle, and we'll be good. Boom, so got that taken care of. Ran a nice piece of loom all the way around over there. I was able to find the switched wire easy enough. So the next one up that I think we're going to grab is probably the power wire that's in this. Now this wire specifically is for the Terminator X Max harness that I believe. So this is a transmission power, but it needs a source of constant 12 volts is what I believe. So because that's the only other red wire I have sticking out, and that's what it says that it needs, which I know goes right here. So it's time to snip all these old connectors off and get her cleaned up and ran. Look at there, nice and neat, baby. Come on. Ain't that looking better? Ain't that looking better? So next I'm gonna move along to our grounds. We got a couple of these to run, one over there, one right here. So we're probably gonna run those somewhere underneath, probably back where they were. I got a nice grounding spot underneath this panel here that's easy to reach, easy to work on in case we gotta test out grounds at the racetrack. But I think what we'll do is as we get all these new wires ran and get them all loomed up and everything, we'll probably zip tie them nice and neat to the existing harnesses and then make the turn up here nice and neat. And fellas, this is turning out so good. I'm so happy. But on to the grounds, let's go. Change of plans. These ground wires, they're not gonna reach where I was planning on running them up here under the dash. So instead, we're gonna take my advice from the last video, which by the way, this is part 4 I think we're on. Maybe it's 5, I don't know. I still haven't figured that out. But anyway, whatever part we're on, the previous video to this, the title will be right, but the previous video to this, we talked about nut certs and our nut cert tool and how it's good for grounding stuff. And I think that's what we're gonna do. I think we're gonna drill a hole right over here where the cage plate is. Don't worry, I'll move the camera down there in a second. And before we get this cage plate painted, we're gonna drill a hole, put a nut cert in it and put a bolt in it, and that will be always a perfectly good, serviceable, usable, reachable ground, which accomplishes all of our goals. So, hey, let's do it. Let's zoom in on that. Look at there. Perfectly good ground point forever and always. Alright, over here, this is our fuel pump wire that we were talking about, the green output to the fuel pump. And then this is another constant 12 volt wire that we need to hook up. The other one that you saw was specifically for the transmission side of the harness. But this is another one of those important ones too. So we're gonna get these things hooked up. This blue and white one is the tack output that we were talking about that we don't use, but it is ran. We have it in case we do need it. But let's get these two hooked up, and then the Holley itself will be almost back to where we started without our additional inputs and outputs that we're going to get wired up over here at some point. But for today, I think these two right here are going to be the last ones that we need to make, and luckily for us, they're right there. This was all ran through a nice harness that I already had built, so whenever I ran it back around through the firewall, I just had to snip them. So it's just as simple as crimp and play. It's not really quite plug and play, but crimp and play is good enough, huh? I know there's been an awful lot of time lapse in this video, but that's because it's somewhat self-explanatory. If you do like I said and you just read those instructions, then those wires, you know, if you just hook them up the way that the freaking instructions tell you to do it, it's not that hard. The hard part is maybe finding where you want to pick up these sources of power, because like your constant 12 volts need to go basically straight to the battery. They need to go as straight to the battery as possible. The least amount of junctions, the better. The instructions are clear about this. Follow that step. It's not as critical as necessarily the main power and ground. That one absolutely goes to the battery. If you don't put those on the battery, you're an idiot. You're going to have problems the whole time. I promise. I don't care what you say. It's going to give you issues in some capacity. But long story short, do what the instructions say. Find your constants, find your switched, run good clean grounds, use a riv nut maybe as a new idea. But all of this, man, guys, this is coming together really clean. I'm really happy with the way all of this is getting tidied up. Of course, we got our zip tie tails to cut, and yes, please cut your zip ties. That is just as important as reading the instructions. Cut the tails off your zip ties, and if you got a chance, make them all face the same way. It's little things like that that are going to make a big difference in the amount of pride that you have in the project, the amount of quality that you have in the project, and it just shows that you took your due diligence to do so. And this is something that I'm pretty clear on, that wiring is very wasteful, guys. If you looked in the time lapse in a couple of places, you probably saw me zip tie, cut, and then re-zip tie something because I just wasn't happy with it. Well, I have probably 30 or 40 zip ties in here that I used at one, you know, to hold something one time and then cut it right back off and did it a different way. But that's part of it. Do the wasteful things that end up being the right things. I'm not telling you to just waste stuff for the sake of wasting it, but if you're not happy with it, fix it right then and now. Do those things that make you happy now, because I promise you they'll make you even happier further down the road. But as always, I'm Diggins71. Thanks for tuning in today. We ran our 4 kind of loose ground power constant wires that we've already talked about 100 times. I'm really bad at doing that, by the way, just repeating the same thing I've said. But anyway, we ran those wires, finally getting into some Holley specific stuff today. Next up on the agenda is probably to start running these inputs and outputs and planning for more inputs and outputs down the road. So I'm gonna have to get out my pen and paper, notebook paper, and make sure that I have all of the sensors that I want to add included in the wiring now, because I don't want to have to redo all of this again. If I can get everything tucked under the carpet now, that's going to be the good thing to do. Even if I don't use it, I can run this under the truck where I intend a sensor to go, even if it doesn't exist yet. Stuff like that is it's a pretty big deal, and it can save you tons and tons of headache down the road. So maybe next video, inputs and outputs, and all of these. I think I started to say this earlier and got distracted, but all of these videos are gonna be on a playlist for Holley wiring. Check that out. And speaking of playlists, I have playlists for basically every single video on the channel. So if you're here and you like racing, good for you. I have racing stuff. If you're here and you like me working on the truck in the garage, well, I have a playlist for that. This is you know, there's lots to be done here and lots to be seen, so find it in a playlist, turn that sucker on, and let it rip. This is why I put in the work and extra stuff for you guys, so that way you can reap the benefits of seeing multiple days, multiple videos across a singular playlist. Anyway, long story short, wiring getting done, wiring getting clean. I'm Diggins71. My name is Dylan. Thanks for watching. Keep digging. We'll see you next time.